Incredibly, Super Saiyan 4 is back and with an all-new look, filtering the classic 90s design through modern Toriyama and leaning heavily into its great ape origins. Before we even get to the animation in this episode, I thought it'd be fun if I shared the design sheets for this form and talked a little bit about how we ended up here. While Akira Toriyama provided many a design for Dragon Ball GT, the original Super Saiyan 4 was in fact not his doing. This was all from the mind of GT's character designer Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru, and if you've been paying attention over the past few months, you'll know he is also the designer for Daima. Toriyama would go on to draw Super Saiyan 4 in 2005 for the GT home release, while simultaneously praising how it was a great example of a design where he would often struggle to remember if it had come from himself or not. The original GT design from Nakatsuru isn't too dissimilar from what's seen within the episodes themselves, but one particular element was always largely ignored. Those big old ape arms and huge fists are usually gone. It was more often than not depicted more conventionally. With this new Super Saiyan 4 design comes fists that are even bigger, and those bulging forearms are outright exposed with no fur on them at all. Nakatsuru described the original GT design as Goku with primal power, bringing together Great Ape Goku and Super Saiyan Goku. This new design really brings those Great Ape elements to the forefront, not just in the oversized arms, but also in spots like the new sideburns that I imagine are meant to echo the Ozaru's. Of course, it's impossible to say at this point what elements were contributed by Toriyama, but given Goku has a sportswear style waistband and Toriyama adores tracksuits, that at least feels like a surefire bet. Likewise, the chest area and its new spiky fur coverage feel right out of the design language seen on Gomar, so that may well be a Toriyama element too. Nakatsuru said back in the day that he made the fur red just because it seemed strong, while the color in Daima not only spreads to the once black hair, but is now a more burgundy shade, more like Super Saiyan God, with the red instead making its ways to the eyes, again, like Super Saiyan God. It's a design that screams divinity meets power, which I think is appropriate given how this form is attained. It extends to the aura during the transformation too. Ayakamaki, the storyboard artist for this episode, was the one who conjured up that element, stating that she wanted a mix of calming water to represent the sacred element drawn out by Neba, and then aggressive flames that represent the Ozaru's wildness. Strangely, there were moments in the board where this aura was meant to exist, but instead it was replaced with a generic glow. Maybe too much visual noise, too complicated? Who knows? Either way, it's clear a lot of thought went into this design, and I really like it. I do think it's definitely a grower though. I know reactions have been a little bit all over the place. For full disclosure, I first saw this form almost a year ago now, and my first impression was also a little bit mixed, given how much I love that original GT version. But over time, I've actually found myself really appreciating how goofy it is, and seeing it in motion this week really cemented it as a fun and appropriate take for this series. It is Toriyama's Super Saiyan 4, and I think it really works. Moving into the content of this episode, I have to lead with an apology. In my last video, I attributed a pretty bad scene to Tadayoshi Yamamuro, but I was wrong. It's likely that actually came from Hiroyuki Itai, a Dragon Ball Super animation director who was fairly on model. Easy mistake to make, but an important one to fix because Yamamuro's redemption arc continues. It may well come as a surprise to you, but the chief animation director for this episode was none other than Tadayoshi Yamamuro. He has shot up in prominence on this series. We've seen him do animation direction, and now chief animation direction. Sure, there are still a number of Nakatsuru redraws throughout, but by and large, the look of this episode is defined by Yamamuro, and it looks great. If you cast your minds back, believe it or not, 10 years now, the original criticisms I levied at Yamamuro weren't just about his stylistic decline, but also about his approach to supervision. He would often erase the idiosyncrasies of talented animators, reducing the efficacy of their work. It would make productions feel like they were all drawn by a single person, homogenizing the work in a way that just made the visuals boring. That is not the case in this episode at all. All of these scenes feel distinct, their unique timings in place, there's a whole variety of expressions beyond the typical stock, and even the unique line work remains. It is great and respectful work, and it's hard to believe this is the same person who's been churning out diabolical Heroes episodes for the past 7 years since Super's finale. I might not love every drawing in this episode, I may even find some of the shape choices unappealing at times, but now it's just a matter of taste in a few moments rather than a pervasive issue across an entire series. If this represents his performance when placed lower down the totem pole, then great, welcome back, happy to have you. This episode kicks off with the return of Sander, the French animator who has drawn so much for the series at this point that I'm surprised he can even look at Dragon Ball anymore. I know a lot of people have compared the start of this scene to a moment in GT, but actually that moment is just straight from the Katsuru's character sheets for the show. And actually, if we look at the Daima design for Super Saiyan 3, you can see pretty clearly that Nakatsuru referenced his old GT sheets for this modern version. I don't have all of the materials for this form, but I have to imagine there's probably a Daima post-reference sheet with this on too. I really like the way Sander conveyed Goku's speed in this scene with the shadowless smears, and all throughout there are layouts that really emphasize the dramatic difference in size between Goku and Gomar, an element that worked really well in the Tamagami 3 fight. The action's snappy and classic, and a great way to kick things off. With Do joining the fight and unleashing his Cookie Monster Super Saiyan 3 power comes Shuichiro Manabe once again. I feel like if I was Goku I'd be offended that Do mimicked Vegeta's hair rather than his, but whatever. Manabe's scene is quite chonky, and it's actually one of my favorites from this episode, not just because of its great expressions and fun posing, but because it really sums up Kamaki's action boarding in this episode. The way she navigates the flow from cut to cut is crazy impressive. Do grabs Gomar, Goku jumps in, and she makes sure to board Do in view, because then, following the hit that leads into the spin, the transition feels completely natural, and it feels like this long singular sequence as the camera pulls out to show Gomar smashing through the rocks. There's also great camera trickery built into this. When Tamagami 1 and Goku are attacking Gomar, the CG team have nailed this absolutely insane sweep with foreground elements to make it look like the whole sequence is rotating, despite the characters not really changing angles much at all. It's a great way of elevating scenes that could have otherwise felt static. I really do have to give a big shout out to Daima's CG team across these episodes. They've been nailing it non-stop, and that really feels like a rarity in so many anime. With Super Saiyan 3 failing to best Gomar comes the return of Ken Arto, another French animator, and what you may well remember from Dragon Ball Super Broly, where he handled some fantastic character animation. While this is technically an action scene with its weighty beatdown up front, it's no surprise that he was designated this cut, given it's all about conveying the sheer struggle Goku's facing. The little stumbles, the punch attempt, Goku's reaction to it all, Arto's really sold the weight of these dire circumstances perfectly, and that is so essential given we finally reached the transformation itself. The vast majority of this sequence is from Sander once again, but it's the concepts that I really want to talk about here. Kamaki's board describes this moment as doused in celestial colors that are conveyed through droplets of water, with the red glow that emerges representing the Ozaru within Goku. She asks for a sequence of veins that convey these two things converging, and it's through that the form is born. It was actually originally way more overt. This moment of the water bursting into a tail was meant to follow with a sequence of said water set against the flames, forming the shape of the Ozaru that would then burst across the screen, revealing its face. I'm not entirely sure why this was cut along with that aura I mentioned earlier, but I'm not going to pretend this isn't still a spectacularly executed moment. It is huge, it's exciting, its color choices are great, and maybe they're just saving the concept for the inevitable return of this form. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, but if you haven't gathered already, this is very much Westerners the episode, and that is no more true than heading into the second half. One of the other French animators who worked with Ken Arto on Broly is here. Mehdi Aouchaoui kicks things off with a sick rotation, which leads right into yet another Frenchman, Olivier Lescaut, conveying Gomar's struggle before he throws him through the mountains. It's a great scene that sells the tides turning on this battle. Hopping to another part of Europe now, German animator Levent is back, with slightly mixed results, I think. I love the start of this, the headbutt and reaction are great, but I do think the scuffle after is momentarily a bit clunky, but that's for a brief second because it then jumps back to goodness once again with a tilt over the rocks. But who comes next is perhaps the most exciting inclusion on this episode. Toshiyuki Sato is here, one of the finest animators working in the industry today, with credits all over some of the best looking shows you have ever seen. So many genres, so many different approaches, he's such a multifaceted talent, and most importantly, he's a Dragon Ball fan, having drawn some, well, okay, questionable fan art before, but you know, we take those victories. The complexity of this scene is kinda crazy. The background animation as Goku swings around the rock is so detailed and well executed. I love the big, exaggerated chest puff as Goku pulls back for the punch, and of course the fun tail antics as Goku bounces all over Gomar are just great. Again, Komaki's board is so full of fun and really utilizes all aspects of Goku's new form. To follow all this with even more complex background animation is crazy stuff. What an astonishing scene. And yet, with that said, my favorite scene of this entire episode is what follows. And not only is it not from a longtime industry legend, it's not even from a particularly well-established animator. This is Anno, someone who was literally a viewer of mine when he was a teenager, and now he's working on the show thanks to Levent recommending him to Toei. That is insane to think about, makes me feel ancient, but I am so beyond blown away by what he produced here. Just on a technical level, the sheer number of moving parts to this sequence is insanity, but one aspect that has caught many fans' attention is the way Goku moves. The monkey-style run is completely unique to this scene, and that was a collaborative idea between Anno himself and the director. All throughout this are little details that I think make this version of Super Saiyan 4 feel so special. It completely utilizes Goku's proportions and stature to sell what is easily the most compelling action sequence of this episode. It is so damn good, and I cannot wait to see what bright future awaits this young talent. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find out who animated the team-up sequence, but the spin and dramatic camera shift that leads into the main sequence are breathtaking stuff, and the effect shapes are so cool. Thankfully, I did manage to find out that the crazy snappy combos that follow come from young Swiss animator Berkant Dumlu. He has very little anime experience, but the work on his various social channels speaks for itself. I honestly think his scene here is some of the most weighty and impactful animation across this entire episode. Jumping inside a mountain now, we're heading over to Latin America with Alex Torres, a young Mexican animator who came up on Jujutsu Kaisen, and now here he is with his best work yet. This is an effects animation extravaganza. The sheer number of moving layers in this sequence is hard to even fathom. The sequence of Gomar zooming through the mountains is insanity, but that Kamehameha is the real talking point. It's somewhat in the storyboard, but actually Alex was allowed to totally overhaul it and elevated it to new heights with his own ideas. How do you even begin to start animating the floor, the effects, the characters, all this impeccable work at once? It makes for one of the most insane Kamehameha build-ups this franchise has ever seen. And while that Kamehameha does get interrupted, it actually offers the opportunity for a very cool callback. I'm sure we all remember the remarkable sliding Kamehameha from Dragon Ball Super animated by Ken Otsuka. Well, he is back, and this time he's animating Goku doing an upside-down Kamehameha. I think the awesome fiery effects engulfing the traditional beams speak for themselves, but I just can't help but think he was given or picked this scene entirely because of how closely it resembles his work on that Super episode. It's a powerful conclusion to the action portion of this episode as Goku loses his powers and the episode switches to a more narrative focus. It is no less interesting though. I think the POV shot as Glorio approaches Hybis is really unusual and sells the turmoil the character is feeling. There's a rising unease that permeates through those final few minutes. Glorio is bathed in partial darkness in these scenes with quite intense light on one side of him, a detail that is also baked into the storyboard once again, captioned with the word lost. It's fairly overt visual storytelling to show him stuck between the path of darkness and the light. I mean, a Dragon Ball very literally stands between him and Rinsu at one point, the very thing that this whole decision hinges on. I just adore the atmosphere that's conjured up in these final moments. Purunga's summoning is of course really well animated, the Gomar comedy is great, but it's the way all of these elements are woven together in ways that don't undercut one another that I think is done so well. This episode really is Dragon Ball Daima at its very, very best. Of course, nothing may be able to touch the highs of 3.5 minutes of Ryo Onishi in terms of pure motion, but the collective package on offer in this episode is what makes it, in my view, Daima's strongest episode yet. It is a resounding success in almost every area, and it's so cool that on the production side of things, it's a gathering of international talents, a celebration of the series' worldwide popularity. With only 2 episodes left, it's going to be so interesting to see just how far this magnificent team can take this show. How will they keep upping the ante and ensure the finale to this extraordinary battle hits home? I look forward to finding out, but for now, I'll close this out by asking for your thoughts on this episode, along with a reminder to rate the video, subscribe if you're new, and I will of course see you next time.